Seven on Sundays podcast is intended for mature audiences. Episodes discuss sensitive and fraught topics that many teens and 20-somethings face, but may be triggering. The content may not be suitable for all audience members. Please take caution when listening.
I felt like I had a deformity that made me completely unlovable, and that if I could, in a sexual way, please a guy, then that's so great. And that was kind of even became the goal for me because I felt so badly about myself. And I was like, well, I don't deserve to feel good if my vagina is this ugly.
Hello and welcome to Seven on Sundays, the podcast about how young adults are navigating sex, relationships, and life today.
We are your hosts, Dr. Shez Leby and Stephanie Boy, and each week we will share our candid conversations with young adults and experts about today's tough topics. Today we are talking with Brooke. Brooke is a college student that's going to talk to us about a very tough topic. The topic today is genital dysmorphia, which is a part of body dysmorphia, and this kind of current culture of a pursuit for perfectionism in terms of our bodies. So this is a really important topic for young people today, for all of us, really. Brooke is a brave warrior to help us understand better about genital dysmorphia. Thanks for coming to the show, Brooke.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Brooke, I really am curious. You and I met through a mutual friend of mine that's daughter goes to school out in California with you. And we were discussing women not feeling as though they own and embrace their right to pleasure. And it led to a long discussion about several topics, which hopefully we're going to touch on today. But I think it's really interesting because you're very articulate about this. So I'd love to hear what you have to say about your peer group. Do you feel as though for a lot of women, young women, college age women, that there is some sort of hesitancy or some sort of, feeling as though they don't deserve pleasure in the same way that men do? And then we'll talk about the reasons why we think that that is happening.
I definitely think there is a huge disparity between men and women feeling pleasure. I think for men, it's always just been this inherent thing that they're going to do and everyone knows they're going to do it and there's no really shame around it. But I think for a lot of different reasons, there's a lot of shame that is surrounded female pleasure.
Yeah, so I would say that there is definitely a disparity, and it starts pretty young because, I give this story a little bit maybe in another podcast, but my son in his 5th grade puberty talk, they started talking about, the boys asked about masturbation. And that is actually pretty common, that we talk very openly and acknowledge that boys do masturbate. We know that they have a relationship with their own body. And I think that that's where there's a huge disparity. Females are never given that relationship to their body. If anything, we don't say the name. Most women don't even know what a vulva is. They know a vagina, they know labia, but they don't know that a vulva is the entire outer part. So what was your relationship with your body, and how does not talking about things push it or make it something taboo? And, is that something you can relate to?
So my story, I've honestly had a pretty intense journey with all of this, starting from a pretty young age, probably starting from the beginning of high school. I just started feeling very insecure about my vagina, and no one's really talking about our vaginas too much, except from what I was around, it was just being kind of talked about in a bad sense. A lot of derogatory terms were used, and I was always pretty good friends with my guy friends, and I would hang out with them a lot, being the only girl. And I think that they would forget at times what was coming out of their mouths. And I've just heard a lot of derogatory terms, who has the worst roast beef, or whose meat curtains are the worst, and how gross it is to have and quote unquote like outie vagina. And all around me, even like my best girlfriends, like would talk about like, oh my God, that's so gross. Like, imagine if you had that. Like, it shaped my self-worth, honestly. I really, really had, and still I struggled to overcome this. I think I've overcome it a lot compared to what I used to be, because it significantly affected me to the point where like I would have panic attacks during sex and have to like completely stop, and the guy would be like, "Are you okay? Like what did I do? Like what's going on?" And it was always affecting me intensely. And I think on another level it just developed my self-worth all around, just inherently believing that I am lesser than because of this. I have a long-term boyfriend now, and he's the greatest person ever, and he's really, really helped me overcome all of this, but it's still a struggle for me. Like, I still go to the gym and I'm constantly worried, like, oh my gosh, does my vagina look too big in my like spandex? And it's just a constant worry of mine. And for a while, I was not able to experience pleasure. Like, sex for me was very much always like about the guy. And I think that is, that's the case for a lot of more juvenile sexual experiences all around. But for me, I felt like I was not worthy of experiencing pleasure. I felt that, to be completely honest, I felt like I was like disabled. I felt like I had a deformity that made me completely unlovable, and that if I could, in a sexual way, like please a guy, then like that's so great. Like, and that was kind of even became the goal for me, because I felt so badly about myself. And I was like, well, I don't deserve to like feel good if my vagina is this ugly. Like, I have to just focus on like making sure I can make the guy I'm with come. So it really affected me like beyond words.
Okay, Brooke, first of all, I want to say thank you so much for going here with this sort of topic, because this is the ultimate place of vulnerability for women, I believe. And so thank you for that. And also, I'm curious what age this started, because I feel like that's really important for people to hear when this starts. What age was it, and how did this start that you had this reckoning of, I'm not okay in my vulva, like something is different than other people or something is not enough? What age and how did that come up?
I would say probably about maybe 15, maybe even 14, honestly, or 13, somewhere in that like early teenage range. I don't really remember like specifically what triggered all of this, but I think just over time, I kind of just picked up on certain verbiage that was used, and like the way people were talking about vaginas. And then I guess when I was a little older and like I had seen like porn or something that like showed me what like the quote unquote like ideal picture perfect vagina looks like, then I was like, okay, yeah, my vagina doesn't look like this. And so I guess like my vagina fits into the category that all of these people are saying is bad. I don't know if it was some sort of energy I was giving out, but it just like followed me. Like, I just kept being put in these situations where people were like talking to me about like using these derogatory terms. And like, I had one friend like use the term wizard sleeve a lot, and she would say how she would make fun of her boyfriend's ex-girlfriend because her boyfriend told her that she had a wizard sleeve. And she actually showed me a photo of her vagina one time and was like, look at how disgusting this is. And I was like so taken back. I was like, oh my God, how do I react in this situation? And it's just always been something that's kind of followed me. And yeah, it's made me like severely depressed. It's really put me in some dark, dark places. And I think it kept me in this cycle of getting into like the same situationship over and over, where I would be talking to a guy and I would think it'd be going somewhere, and we'd really be hitting it off, and then all of a sudden they'd be like, I don't want anything. And it was this same kind of thing happening over and over. And then I just attributed that. I was like, oh yeah, I guess there really is something wrong with me. Like, no one wants to date me. So it really just became this thing that just was like kept spiraling.
Wow. Thank you again for sharing this story. And I just want to say, I know that you're not alone in this because I hear it from students, always the ones who come up and talk after class and share things that, they didn't realize. And it's something that men struggle with as well. I mean, for forever, we've been talking about what men's bodies look like. And I think, the one thing that's true about pleasure, and if we're talking about your ability to embrace your own body and your pleasure, it's almost impossible if you're so self-conscious about what you look like. And the other thing I know is that it's not something that people talk about very readily, which is why I'm so grateful for you, because there's some idea in culture that if you're talking about it, you have the problem. And I want to make it very clear that this is just something that you believe because of what culture has indoctrinated, and it's a fear that all of us have. I mean, anorexics are not overweight. It's just their perception of themselves. So when we talk about this, we are not talking about you in particular. We're just talking about that this is the way that we it's the mental health side of this problem that Dr. Shez can talk about. But as far as what I would like to ask you is, because it is a topic that doesn't get talked about a lot, I think the fact that people are bringing it up so frequently when they're young, first of all, speaks to their immaturity. I don't know that it happens as much in college, but I just think it's the fear. It's the fear of like, oh my God, do I have this? Or let's shame someone else so that mine doesn't look as bad, because nobody really knows what it's supposed to look like. And we don't have enough experience at that age to know the vast variety of the way penises look and the way, vulvas look. So, I guess, did you ever do you hear anything from your friends, from your peer group, that you feel like you are not alone in this, besides the fact that I'm telling you you're not alone?
Yes. I mean, I honestly, like you said, I have really not discussed this with anyone. It's kind of like astonishing to me that I'm sitting on a podcast right now discussing it, because the only people I've ever talked about this are my mom, my best friend, and my boyfriend. And like, I have not been able to speak about this without like pouring tears out of my eyes. But I do know that like my best friend feels similarly. And I do know that girls in general just kind of, a lot of them do feel uncomfortable, like pleasuring themselves or being pleasured. And I think that stems from just both self-worth and also just this inherent, like, I don't know if it would be a belief or just like unspoken belief that women are not the same as men in that sense.
I'm so grateful for you sharing all these things. And I do want to say that part of the healing is, even if you told one person, your mom or your best friend or your boyfriend, the fact that you've talked with three people, in my mind as a therapist, is incredible. That's very healing. And that's maybe why you are able to now talk about it on a podcast. To meet the criteria for a body dysmorphic disorder, I would say that you probably met it or have met it, that it's this preoccupation with an aspect of your body to the point where it really interrupts, healthy functioning, and is a constant in your mind. It is an obsessive compulsive disorder, or falls under that. So you definitely have that. And there's many ways that you work through that, but it's very much like Steph said, like an eating disorder, where the picture may be very distorted in the mind. But because I would say you, from what you're describing, you went through this traumatic period of boys. I'm assuming it was all boys.
It was a lot of girls too.
Okay, girls too.
Some of my best friends. And I was just like, oh my gosh, like this is so horrible.
So them naming things in such a derogatory way, and then you privately kind of understanding, hey, do I fit that or not fit that? That is an intense trauma. So my question is, was there a point with your mom that your mom said, or your best friend, that they kind of level set for you and said, no, actually, you fall within the range of completely normal, not that you were showing them things, but, or a doctor. I mean, so I was just wondering if anybody kind of interrupted that traumatic myth for you.
Really, I would say the person who did that the most would be my boyfriend. Of course, like my mom and my best friend were like, you don't have that. Like you're being crazy. But my boyfriend obviously was the one who was actually like seeing my vagina. And it took me a while. I've been with my boyfriend for 5 years, and it wasn't until maybe like late year 1 or 2 that I was able to even start remotely bringing up the fact that I'm uncomfortable with my body, and that's why I'm acting this way during sex. That's why I don't want to have sex. And it created not problems, because he would never like get mad at me or anything, but it definitely created some uncomfortable times where I would never want to have sex, or like we would start having sex and I would get so severely uncomfortable and like have an anxiety attack and have to stop, and he would just be so confused and like taken back. He's like, well, what is going on? And eventually I was able to make it like within like, I don't feel comfortable talking about this, but I'm really uncomfortable with my body. It's not you. And then eventually I was able to kind of just tell him everything about all the trauma I've experienced that's shaped my perception of myself, because it absolutely is an obsessive compulsive thing. I struggle with that in a lot of different aspects of my lives, and a little bit of perfectionism. So it's just like the perfect storm of things that I've created this like belief in myself. But yeah, he's really been the one to completely like stop all of those beliefs. And really, he just tries so hard to like make me feel normal and beautiful. And yeah, so he would most definitely be like the one who has helped me the most.
I don't think that someone needs to tell you that you're normal. There is no normal. If somebody telling you that you're okay and that I'm sure you don't have that, there is no that. That
That
You're
was
right.
wrong.
You're
that
right.
is that is a
Yeah.
vulva, and it can look any way. And I think the second that we start saying like, oh, you don't have that, it's a little bit disparaging to the women who might. And that does not negate their right to pleasure. And I think the second that we look at the problem of being like, let me help you understand that you're okay, we bring to attention the fact that you're okay and somebody isn't. Every body, no matter what your body looks like, roast beef, no roast beef, it doesn't matter, because even roast beef, like, is derogatory toward people who might have darker pigmented skin. And I think, well, how do you get away from that? Like we just have to realize that there is no normal. There are Instagrams dedicated to showing that there's a variety of what vulvas look like. And so yours is fine. I don't care what it looks like, it's fine. Do you get pleasure from it? As far as like you're questioning going to the gym, I think this is a really great point. Bikinis have gotten so small. I don't know anybody's labia that can fit into a bikini. I mean, it's
That's so
it's
true.
absurd. You have
It
to be a
is. It's
Barbie doll for
crazy.
your labia to fit inside them. So using that as a barometer of, oh, you're okay, your labia fits inside your bikini, that's absurd. Nobody can see your labia when you have gym pants on. I mean, by that people mean camel toe. The only way you don't have something that goes through the center is if you don't have a seam there and you didn't have a parting of your two labia majora. It's impossible to not have it. Not having it requires you to be a Barbie doll. And so that's why I want to talk about culture, and that culture is creating this, and we have to fight back against culture. What you are focusing on clearly is what is persisting in your mind. You're thinking about it all the time. But
I just want to say something though. I think we need to stop for a second and go down the road, because I did not mean to say that there is some quote unquote normal. My stance 100% on all things, noses, breasts, vulvas, anything, is that normal is all shapes and sizes, colors, experiences, everything, and that there is no normal. The reason why I asked about if someone said that to you is because I was hoping that they were of the same elevated stance to say, yes, all is normal. And a doctor would know that. And I know that firsthand from a young woman that was worried that she was abnormal. And this wonderful gynecologist said, no, you're exactly normal. You've got what you've got, and that is perfectly great. It works. It's there. It's wonderful. It's beautiful. And somebody else might look different, but that's not the aspiration. All sizes are welcome. So I just want to correct that because I didn't mean to leave you with that.
That's on me, honestly, for like phrasing it that way in these terms. I'm reminded now, I went to a consultation for a labiaplasty, and yes, the doctor did say like, and this is normal. However, like some people just are uncomfortable with it and they want like I don't know. So I have been told before that it's normal.
I think what I was trying to say is that culturally we have to look at where that comes from too. I mean, if you think about women just historically, think about douching. I mean, that was that was what we did prior to shaming women about the size of their labia. We shamed them about the smell of their vaginas, you know? So it's always going to be there. There's always going to be this cultural idea, and I honestly believe it's to take away women's power, like sexual power. I do ultimately, I'm not a big like, I am a feminist, but I'm not like big like, ooh, down with men kind of thing. That's not what I'm saying. But I do
Right.
think that you take away someone's inherent right to pleasure and their body and loving their body and embracing their body, because embracing our bodies and embracing our vulvas and everything about it is part of our power. So I think that that has culturally been around since the beginning of time. People are either talking about they slept with too many people, they didn't sleep with enough people, you know, the Madonna horror complex. There's so many cultural things. This is just the latest iteration, and we have to push back against it.
It's amplified that big penis is the goal and some kind of version of a porn vulva is the goal. And that's even more than it used to be. But I think it's been there for a long time, especially for men.
Yeah, for men, I think it's definitely been there. For women, it's always been smell, that kind of stuff. I think also, you know, you have to remember that women have traditionally had hair on their vulvas. So seeing labia and how the labia minora maybe peeked out was not an issue. You know, once you shave off all the hair, then everything is exposed.
It is upsetting and fascinating to me about this, and we've talked about it before, but having a look of a prepubescent, pre-hairy girl be what is shown as beautiful is really interesting to me. And why are we letting that? Isn't there a purpose for our hair? And isn't there a purpose for, the way things naturally are? But now it is this case where even young girls want to shave, in all areas because they don't want to be hairy. And I think it serves a purpose in some respects. So that's an interesting other thought.
Yeah, it is interesting. And my mom's actually mentioned that before about how, like, that sort of a porn star look is what a minor would look like, and it's not really, yeah, it definitely is very, very interesting.
When we talk about these things, obviously it has a psychological component. It also has a sexual component that you kind of brought up, which is your inability to experience pleasure, and you're feeling as though, which we've heard said many times with, I'm sure Dr. Shez has heard it in her clients. I have definitely heard it with college students when we're talking very much about these things, but that the fact that pleasure, if they pleased a guy, then that was good enough for them. That counted as a successful hookup. And I think that we're not addressing, again, some of these underlying issues, which are our shame of our bodies. Emily Nagoski talks about how if you're fearful of what you have, it puts on the brakes, you know? So you had brought up your friend and her, what her fear of experiencing pleasure, her fear of masturbation, is that?
Both, yeah. I think she just feels uncomfortable for like an unknown reason with her vagina, with experiencing pleasure when with a partner and by herself. It's just something that like makes her very uncomfortable. And I definitely used to feel that way as well. And I still kind of do. I mean, it's at a much, much lesser extent now. And I think mine is definitely derived from these experiences that I've recounted. But yeah, I think for some girls, they just don't even they might not have the same experiences as me that have shaped them, but they still just have this like the feeling of it being uncomfortable for them.
Yeah, you know that there is what we call, do you know anything about the orgasm gap?
I may not by name.
So there was like in 2018, there were a lot of articles about the orgasm gap, but basically because there was a study that came out that showed that 91% of men usually or always reach orgasm as a result of hookups, and only 39% of women said that they usually reached orgasm because of a hookup, which is like a 52% disparity between the two, and they call that the orgasm gap. And they're trying to figure out like why that happens, and we could opine about what it is that creates that gap. I know that part of it is holding back and not believing that you deserve to have pleasure. I think this is why parents sort of recoil at the thought of their children being taught about pleasure as a part of sex education. And I'm not here saying that I think that it should be taught in school, because honestly, I think there's a lot of weirdos that could really enjoy talking about pleasure with young girls. And but I do think it's important that as parents, we do talk about the fact that intercourse should be pleasurable, because it opens up these kind of conversations. Like, even with your parents, Brooke, your mom, she could have been like, well, why are you not enjoying it? And even if you were afraid of telling her your fears about your genitalia, she could have been like, Brooke, I think that, pleasure is something that you're supposed to have equal to your partner. You shouldn't be doing things that aren't pleasurable. But if we don't talk about that, then too many young women are happy to go along pleasing the guy, feeling fear about their bodies. And, in today's culture, porn informed sex is usually more aggressive and violent. We can get into that. But all of these things will inhibit female pleasure. So, what do you think about that?
Yeah, totally. You're right. I think it does need to be discussed more from like a maternal standpoint, I guess would be the only way, because it is definitely uncomfortable. Still, I mean, I'm like 23 years old. I don't love talking to my mom about sex, but I think since it is so taboo, it has just emancipied everything that you just said. I have a friend whose mom is a sex therapist, and she has always been so comfortable and just like so free in a sense with that. And I think it's because like having a mom that was a sex therapist, I mean, that it was definitely a whole different dynamic for her than like the rest of what the average girl experiences in their relationship with their mom, and talking about sex and pleasure and all of that. I think it's tough, but I think it just needs to be discussed more among women.
I so appreciate you saying that. As somebody that does sex therapy, I am super appreciative that there are people out there that are open about these things. Here's what I notice in the world, and this is a zoom out bigger thing. We have difficulty talking about all emotions. We have difficulty acknowledging the acceptance and the allowance for all emotions. And that includes ecstasy and orgasm. We don't talk about depression, and we don't talk about ecstasy and orgasm. And I'm not sure why exactly that is. I mean, I have my theories, but that's where it's really important to teach young girls that yes, there can be pleasure with your body, there can be pleasure in nature, there can be pleasure with friends, there can be all different kinds of pleasure. And unfortunately, we don't explore any and all emotions. So that is something beautiful that you have these role models, people that are sex therapists or a person that can help to be like, yeah, this is a normal part of life. This is okay. And I don't think boys are taught it either. They just explore and quickly find their bodies and figure that out and maybe talk about it amongst themselves. But it's not even that necessarily that dads talk about. You're allowed to feel ecstasy and elation with yourself and with a partner is something we should be talking about. We should be talking to our children about, yes, not only do we make babies together, we can experience great, beautiful, passionate joy. Why is that so taboo?
I think that's really been lost in a lot of senses. Like, as a society, that's not really how sex is nowadays. Sex is really taken for granted, and one night stands are a huge thing. And to each their own. But I had never been the type of person, and it's definitely because of how I've felt about myself that I've never been the type of person to have a one night stand or even like to have sex with anyone I wasn't somewhat talking to in a more relationship sense. And I just think, I don't know, I value sex, and I do think it's a beautiful thing. I'm just a bit more traditional in the sense, like, I want to be a mom, I want to have a family, and that's kind of just all of these things kind of come together and like shape my beliefs. But it's really sad because we are just straying away from that as a society, and it's really not sacred or valued anymore.
We are definitely not making it sacred or valued. And I think that goes back to conversations about morality, which I have a lot of opinions on, but I want to, we can talk about the why we don't have that in culture, but I do think it's important to say to dads, and I think all of these conversations are so challenging, right? Like, I think one of the reasons that women aren't being sexually satisfied is, what does that say about a female who knows her body, who says to her partner, no, you have to do it like this? That means either A, she's masturbated, which so many people are afraid to acknowledge. Females acknowledge that they masturbate. It says, oh, I know, I've been with other people and I know how to be sexually satisfied. That says, A, am I promiscuous? You know what I mean? It brings up a whole lot of emotions for women that are negative, that are socially negative, not actually negative, but socially looked down upon, right? So there's a lot of
Right.
reasons for that. But I think that this is actually where dads can be really great, because dads can say, and it doesn't have to be, I'm not talking about like your actually how to get intimate pleasure, but a dad could very easily say to his daughter, if dads know when their children are sexually active or whatever. And if their dad said, listen, you have a boyfriend, you deserve to experience as much pleasure as they do. There's nothing embarrassing about saying you deserve the same pleasure that your partner gets from anything that happens. And I think if a dad says it, it's actually powerful. And it also starts to normalize the conversation in general, male female dialogue. If your dad had the strength and I don't know if the proper term is temerity, but to say to you, hey, listen, I know you've been dating so and so for a while, and I know how relationships go. I know what, culturally, we always talk about men, and, a lot of culture says that men get pleasure, but, that is something that is deserving for both parties, and it should not be a one-way street. I have not said anything that is super invasive, but I think you get the message from that quite clearly, that your dad is on your side and this is not a one-way street.
Right, and that would be great, but I think really what's happening is it's almost it's the opposite, where parents, despite knowing that sex is a natural thing that everyone is going to partake in, they almost forbid it for a while, until, like, at least my parents did not want me. It was never really said, but like, they didn't want me out having sex from like when I was in high school or anything like that. So I think a lot of those experiences, so that it becomes this like forbidden saying that, and that put a lot of shame around it in itself, because it's like, oh my gosh, like, this is so bad of me. Like, I'm kind of like dirty.
I just want to say, we teach our kids a lot of things, a lot of skills before they actually need to implement them in their lives. By college, 97% of young adults are having sex outside of marriage. 97%. So I don't look at this as, in the moment you're saying to your child, go experience pleasure. This is a message that can be given early and not necessarily, relate to a specific relationship that you're in. It's like anything else. We need to talk about what does a healthy relationship look like long before our children are in relationships. We need to talk about what does loving your body look like long before your child's body changes. You have to have the conversation and assume that at one point your child is going to have it. And the more you make this an easy conversation, your child will look to you or come to you with questions and fears and anything like you experienced and talk to your mom about.
Totally. Yeah.
Brooke, you're so insightful. We were talking today, we were on a radio show, and we were talking how there is not a course or a manual in how to have relationships. And I mean a manual that everybody gets, kind of like driver's ed. You know, we all have to take this test and study to learn how to drive a car, but we're not taught, and there is not a universal, and it doesn't even have to be universal, but there is not a manual on how to have healthy relationships and or how to parent, right? So as Steph is saying, starting these conversations really, really early, and can't wait for our book to come out, by the way, because it's going to help with that. But having these conversations really early before any of these things happen help make these decisions not so secretive and taboo, as you were saying, and not such a shame-ridden thing, but accepting that our kids are going to get in relationships. No matter what those look like, they're going to get in relationships. So let's help them have the best, most positive experiences to grow from and to learn from for future reference, for future relationships. And we don't do that. We talk about it when there's a problem, or we don't talk about it at all. And not talking about it does not mean that it's not going to happen. So when we don't talk about sex and relationships, does not mean that, oh, my kid doesn't do that. Not my kid. That's actually very far from the truth. So I love that you did have people, Brooke. I have a quick question about the OCD thing, because our culture right now is really breeding a lot of young women in particular and men really, but that struggle with obsessive compulsive stuff about their bodies in particular, but about many things. It was really funny to me that you said a little bit perfectionist, because I don't think you can be a little bit perfectionist, but I love you, by the way. But do you notice that this obsessive compulsive stuff is in other areas of your life, or was it just with your genitalia?
It's most definitely in other areas. More than just my appearance in general, but I think it's amplified with just my overall appearance. And I've always strived to make everything perfect. So like everything about me had to be perfect, because it was making out for the fact that I felt so much shame surrounding my vagina. I really attribute the perfectionism and OCD to the shame that I have developed around my vagina. I think that it definitely stems from that, because I just remember like I've always been a worrier and just been always trying to make sure everything was perfect. And it's definitely in all aspects of my life, but it's a lot more intense when it comes to my appearance.
Wow, that's really interesting to me, and says so much that this particular things that boys and girls said could lead to a full-blown obsessive compulsive disorder. And that's a very disruptive, hard thing in your life. I want to hear how what worked for you. What are you doing to heal yourself with all of this?
I hate to say this, that it was my boyfriend, and I would love to sit here and say that like I was able to get there myself and to help myself, but I really wasn't. Like I just had this strong belief that the way I looked is wrong. It actually kind of stifled my relationship with God in a sense, because I was mad at God. Like, why did you create me like this? Why couldn't I have looked like something else? It's been my boyfriend who has just showed me like, God, it doesn't matter. And that he balances me out in the sense of my perfectionism and OCD. He really is the total opposite. So he definitely balances me out, and he just shows me that like, you don't have to be perfect to be beautiful is something that I kind of repeat to myself a lot, because it's truly, you don't have to be perfect to be beautiful. And so that's something that's really, really helped me But I've had to do like exposure therapy to this. Like I felt so like of and I'm sure a lot of other girls are like only wanting to have sex when the lights are off, but that was like me to my core. I'm like, I do not want to be seeing the light. And still even I'm like, let's dim the light. Like they don't have to be off, but let's take them down. I've really had to just take control over my thoughts and not let the intrusive thoughts consume me.
I love that he provides that for you, and I think that's really amazing. There are a lot of people out there who don't have that, and I'm just wondering, like, in my opinion, I mean, my whole goal is to stop people from talking about people's genitalia. I just think it's so corrosive to anything healthy happening.
So I would hate for anyone to feel the way that I have. Like I'm sure other people do, but it has taken me to such dark places and it's shaped my entire life. And I would hate for other people to be feeling the way I feel. I mean, it's awful. I wouldn't wish it upon anyone. He's helped me get there, but I have had to really, really work on myself. And I think a great thing is positive affirmations, like just looking at yourself in the mirror and repeating, like, I am beautiful, I am worthy, I am loved, like, I'm capable, I'm smart, all these things, repeating them to yourself, looking yourself in the eye. I actually read that if you wake up in the morning and first thing you do, go brush your teeth with your non-dominant hand and like stare at yourself and just think or say these affirmations in the mirror, it triggers like a different part of your brain to work and to really like absorb it more.
I think there's a study that says that something like 95% of everything that we do every day is like automatic and repeated. So what you're doing is
Yes.
you're breaking, I believe, you're breaking that circuitry and you're creating new pathways in your brain to see yourself in a different way. Do you feel as though if you heard other women or you heard people saying, like, I'm a big one, I am so vocal. When I hear anything that sounds like genital shaming, I am a big one for saying, you know what? That doesn't serve anyone. I don't know what you're trying to say by that. How does that make anyone feel better? Do you feel, or have you been in situations where you've heard people say things and you've stood up, or do you feel like a little bit like I feel like this show should empower people to say like, hey, we need to stop talking about circumcised, uncircumcised, size of a penis, color of labia, smell of labia. Like I'm very big on like, why are you talking about that? What is your goal?
To be completely honest, I have been more cowardly in that sense. I think we maybe touched on this briefly in the beginning. Like talking about it makes it seem like you're the one who, yeah, is dealing with it. And so I've never wanted to like shed the light on me. I've kind of just always like kept very quiet and just internalized everything. And I'm severely depressed, but like it would be great if someone said, hey, that's like messed up and you shouldn't say that.
Well, I can tell you this, you definitely don't have a penis. So you can start by hearing things said about men and getting brave with that. I'm not telling you what to do. You do whatever you want. But for people who do feel like that, and I understand that fear that you think that it's turning the spotlight on you, you can start with hearing people say things about guys and saying, you know what? We shouldn't be talking about anyone's genitalia. Stop talking about size of penises. It's you know what I mean? It makes people feel shameful about their bodies, and we
Yeah.
should be uplifting bodies. So you don't even have to talk about female genitalia, but maybe you'll inspire, maybe you'll get stronger along the way. And, before you know it, we'll have everybody, you know, shaming people who shame genitalia.
Yeah, that's true. And as far as penises, something that me and my friends talk about a lot is like it's not the size that matters, it's how they use it.
Lesbians have better sexual outcomes than cis heterosexual women. They
Not
have like
surprised.
89% of the time they achieve orgasm, where women are 39%.
Right, exactly. It sounds so hard because the vagina is so much more complex than the penis. And I think that the guys who have maybe been in a relationship will know that, whereas like guys who are just kind of messing around all the time, have never really been in a serious committed relationship, they don't know.
I love this call to action, a call to action to stop commenting on other people. And I would take it so far as not just genitalia, but let's stop commenting on people's weight. Let's stop commenting on people's hair, on people's clothes, on people's car, on people's whatever. Let's just look within and stop this judgment. We live in such a society now, especially with social media, to immediately judge good, bad, right, wrong, healthy, unhealthy, yes, no. And there's a whole range in between all those, black and white. So I think it's a call to action to stop judgment. We did a thing in my women's group, and I loved this. We wore a rubber band on our wrist. I challenge everybody to do this. We wore a rubber band, and when we caught ourselves judging something, like if I was in the car and I was like, that driver's such a bad driver, I would switch the rubber band to the other hand. Next time I caught myself with judgment, oh my gosh, seriously, he's leaving the dishes in the sink? What an asshole, whatever. I'd switch the bracelet. And then you look at yourself and you look, 'cause all change starts within. You look at yourself and say, how many times am I judging in a day of all things? Never mind the genitalia thing, which is big, but how many times am I doing that? And let me catch myself, check myself at the door and change. So I challenge us to do that in a big way. The rubber band challenge is really easy and fun. My last question for you, and Steph may have another last question, but Brooke, did you ever have therapy?
Yes, I did. I was in therapy from my senior year of high school until my junior year of college. I'd kind of just stopped, to be completely honest. And yeah, therapy definitely helped me. However, I think it helped me more in a sense of just like being able to vent to someone that I knew like I could trust and they would not be sharing it with anyone else. That's really where it helped me. I don't think like back where I was doing therapy, I sadly wasn't as quick to I didn't really implement a lot of the strategies and things that she gave me to help, but I think therapy is really really great. And for me, like I've always kind of had a little more of like a psychology brain in the sense where like I want to dive in and figure out why am I feeling this way? Like what triggered this to make me feel or act in this way? And so I just kind of have always been interested in like knowing what past experiences have contributed to the person I am because it's really experiences shape you entirely. And I think it's really hard, like you said, with social media in today's day and age, like nobody is looking within for the most part. Everybody is just diluting their lives with looking at other people's lives. And it's really sad. And I think there's got to be a change with the way that we use social media because it's really detrimental for our society in so many ways.
So true. I want to say to you, you can go back to therapy anytime. And it's beautiful to have an open door therapist that when the need comes up, you go back. When you need a break and you need to just move on with life, do your thing, beautiful. But you speak like you've been through therapy. So I'm glad you had a good experience. You're amazing.
Oh, thank you.
So I think it's time that we wrap up this call, but I do want to say one thing. When you hear something, remember, you don't have to just defend the body that you're in, type bodies. Defend the other bodies. Tell people, you know what? She looks in the mirror every day. She knows what size she is. She knows how thin her hair is. She knows how we don't need to be talking about it. And honestly,
Yeah.
that actually raises your vibration.
Yes, it does because words have so much power and people do not understand the power that words have, words that are repeated in your own brain that completely shape your narrative of yourself. And then you're seeing this tunnel vision, you're only seeing this perception. I mean, that's something that I've really, really had to work through because I was so sure of that these bad thoughts I'm having, they're right. They're right. I was so sure that they're right. And I really had to work through that. But I think that if we just are more intentional with the words that we're saying, like it's so easy to do like I catch myself doing this all the time. Like, oh, I'm such an idiot. Like, why do I do that? No. Why am I telling myself I'm an idiot? I'm reaffirming and telling my brain, oh, I'm stupid. Like that is, you should not be saying that about yourself or about others.
I think in a way, even though you're like not everybody has a boyfriend, I want to say the other benefit is if you have somebody telling you something positive about yourself, it gives you less space to say negative things. You know what I mean? Like so it's literally even just breaking that cycle of hearing that over and over again in your head and that fear. He's kind of breaking that cycle too. I'm not recommending that everyone needs a boyfriend, but maybe everybody needs a friend. Like, here's the thing, if you have a
Yeah.
friend who's struggling sexually or in relationship, or you hear them say they don't like their body, take that opportunity to dig in and say, what is it? Like, why are you so afraid of your body? Your body's beautiful. Even just telling your friend, your body is beautiful. It's made perfect. You know, you can be what your boyfriend is to your friends. You can dig in, you can ask them, and maybe they'll feel a little empowered to share with you. I'm so afraid of my genitalia that it's gross. And you can be like, it all looks different. You know, if we all give that message, everybody's is different and it's perfect. Is it doing what it's supposed to? Can you derive pleasure? And by the way, even though sadly women don't in life, it's like 20% of women don't ever experience orgasm. That is just laziness on the part of their partner. There's a term called anorgasmia, which is like where you're unable to achieve orgasm. That is only in 2.8% of men and in 3.6% of women. So it's a very small number. It's certainly not the percentage of women who are not having orgasms. So if they're not achieving orgasms, if they're not enjoying sex, maybe don't be afraid to dig in and ask them and help them, because maybe it's just a perception of themselves that they're not allowing themselves to really be embodied, love their bodies, and enjoy what is happening to their body.
Amen.
We really enjoyed this conversation, and I hope that we're going to talk to you on many other topics because you are very articulate. And I just love your energy toward all of these topics.
Thank you so much. Yes, I'd love to talk more.
And I do want to remind you that you do not have to be perfect to be beautiful, and go even further. There is no perfect. We're all perfect. You are perfect
perfect.
and you are beautiful.
So true.
Share the word with all your friends. They're perfect too, men and
Yeah.
women.
Absolutely.
Thank you for listening to our interview with Brooke. We are going to break down some of the stuff that was talked about, that wasn't talked about. You know, my feeling on all of this is, as I said in the show, shaming vaginas has been around for forever. And it's just kind of interesting to me that women are going in for these surgeries. You don't see men going in for surgeries to cut off parts of their penis. And I just feel like, I don't think that we should shame people for choosing to have surgeries. I just think that we need to have a discussion about why we think that women's body parts need to be cut up and reshaped when we're not doing the same for young men. And, my feeling altogether is that we should stop talking about body parts of other people. And as I recommended to Brooke, start, if you're too embarrassed to talk about yourself because you think, oh, that puts the spotlight on me, turn it around. Be part of the change of stopping talking about other people's bodies, whether it's their breasts the way they hang, stop talking about penises, stop talking about body shapes, stop talking about thigh gaps. All of these things helps us to create a better environment for all of us.
Exactly. So, where it gets really tricky is what happened with Brooke, that this shaming that she first experienced with high school boys, then led down this path of obsessive compulsive thoughts about her body. And then it bled into everything, this pursuit for perfection. OCD is a really serious disorder. It is not an easy disorder to treat. Luckily she did have success. And I love hearing that she did exposure therapy. I loved hearing, that the therapies, the affirmations, and all the things that she did cognitively worked. But it's not an easy one to treat once you're on that path. So this pursuit for perfection is something we really have to think about. And I do know of men that have had liposuction. I do know of men that have gotten this ab thing where they look like they have abs, this sculpting, I guess it's called. Yes, they're not cutting up their penises, but it's like, what are we doing to ourselves? It's like, what's informing that? What's telling us that we need to be in this way? Of course, it's social media and other things, but it's dangerous. And I think questioning that and accepting where you are, which is what, her affirmation is. I love her personal affirmation of you don't have to be perfect to be beautiful. I think that's something we can all adopt. Thank you, Brooke. And really take that to heart, because it's become too pervasive that there's this false beauty out there. And now it's AI generated or filter generated. So it's not real.
I agree with the OCD thing. I think I just heard a story about OCD that is just so sad, about a young boy who can't even live with his family because they're not clean enough. So he had to move in with his grandparents. I mean, obviously, that's the extreme. I think we saw in Brooke that it was extreme. She felt as though she had a deformity. She thought as though there was something wrong with her. And I think a lot of that comes from just obviously porn. But beyond porn, it's just unrealistic. Like you're saying, a filtered life, all of these kind of things. But with faces, we can see that what their filtered beauty is, right? Like beauty, filtered beauty is. With vulvas, we're not looking at a lot of vulvas in life, right? Like most women don't even look at their own vulva. Like most women don't even know what their own vulva looks like. And I have to stop and encourage people to look at their vulva and to accept it for what it is. Like even if you're going to get surgery, understand that your body is beautiful and perfect. And if you can like start a mantra like she did, that you don't have to be quote unquote porn perfect to be beautiful, and just start the acceptance. Even if you're going to get surgery, just understand that your vulva, your vagina, your men's penises will change throughout life. So, interestingly, when we think about like vulvas and the fact that women don't really look at their own, we're certainly not looking at many. If anything, we're seeing porn. We're not seeing realistic vulva depictions. And I really think that people should be encouraged to look at real depictions of vulvas, because they don't look like what porn looks like. In fact, a lot on porn, it doesn't even look like they have inner labia to begin with, which is insane. But I thought this was kind of interesting. We've been studying penises, the anatomical penis, since the 1800s. The first anatomical study about labia, inner labia, outer labia, vaginas in general, was 2005. Over 100 years later, we are looking at vulvas seriously and measuring them. So, you know, it just goes to show just culturally how we are seeking designer vaginas that are determined by masculine ideals. Porn is created by men, and it is for the view of men. And I understand if you're a female and you want to be attractive to men, that's why you're doing this. But I just encourage you to think in the same way that women don't want men to make laws about their bodies and what they're able to do with their bodies. Why are we giving in to creating vulvas that are trimming and snipping and clipping when no man is doing that to his penis? Nor would they consider. Nor would they consider.
Never. Never.
I'm not even a big one for circumcision. Like, our bodies are created the way our bodies are created. So let's stop all the conversation about circumcision, about weight, about boobs, about vulvas. Just stop. Your body is your body. Go for your own aspirational goals. Be realistic. Don't go for the filtered look of porn or whatever. Try to keep things realistic and really do your research about what vulvas do look like, because you will find that actually longer labia is far more common than porn labia.
Exactly. And I'd like to shift the focus to the miracle that our bodies are. We as women, I mean, men are the seeds, right? We as women are birth givers. That vulva is a birth giver, and our breast is a life liver. Like that feeds the world. Without our breasts, okay, now there's formula, hello, and that has all kinds of things in it. But before that, we were the only ones that would feed the infants, right? So we are not only the life giver, we are the life feeder. So the fact that we can't focus on that miracle that our bodies are. And I'm right there with you. I've colored contacts. I color my hair. Like, yes, I have bought into this culture. I'm right there with everybody. But if I step back and look at what a miracle our bodies are as women, like you gave birth to 3 kids, I gave birth to 2 kids. That's incredible. So there should be no shame. I don't like the word should, but I would love it if there was no shame about our bodies, and instead it was celebrating this thing that goes like that to get a head through it, and then it goes like that, and then it can go like that again, and then we can give milk. It's like, what the hell? The most fortifying, like, milk. So anyway, I think that the narrative would be really nice if it changed to that, and men and all people honored the miracle that our parts are, instead of, like you're saying, not looking at it until maybe you are having a baby and then you finally look at it. That's ridiculous. We need to start early and young with these little kids to say, here's what it looks like, and it's amazing. It is amazing.
I actually always say that to my kids. I'm like, it is beautiful, it is pleasure giving, it's life giving. A vulva is something to like literally put on a pedestal. It reminds me again of the way hookups are happening today. They're disembodied versus embodied. I mean, and that's the whole thing is we're looking at our body as though it is something that needs to be altered, something that is not intrinsic to who we are. We were created this way, perfect. I mean, I think perfect. I think it's impossible to fit your labia into a little tiny strip of fabric that they're giving you in bathing suits. That doesn't mean there's something wrong with your body. That means there's something wrong with the little tiny strip of fabric that isn't realistic in any way. Try to live embodied. I'm not shaming anyone for deciding to do labiaplasty, but I think that it has to come after you have worked on accepting who you are, what your body looks like, and loving it, literally loving it, and then saying like, okay, this is what I want to do.
And what Brooke did was showed us that it's a process that can be done. So amen to you as a young person, Brooke. Like, whoa, this woman is a hero. Like, this is amazing, so it can be done. And she's a model for us. She's a role model. So thank you so much, Brooke.
And she did say her boyfriend, she said she would like to say that it was therapy or all those kind of things, but I think it was knowing that her boyfriend accepted her. And I really do believe we all need to understand people's vulnerability, our partner's vulnerability. Even if you have a perfect penis or a perfect vulva or a perfect belly like I have known people, that's the whole thing with body dysmorphia. These are people who objectively other people would look at them and say, "Oh, they're perfect."
Mm-hmm.
They themselves don't see the perfection. If it's just a little reminder to tell your partner that they are perfect for you. They're perfect. You love them the way that they are. That goes, who knows whether Brooke's boyfriend's words will last all the way through her life and she will never consider doing a labiaplasty now. Who knows? We don't know what her trajectory will be. But I love the fact that he's given her that confidence right now. And I really do believe that that's powerful. When you are a teenager, you're so all over the place. And, I think a lot of body acceptance, nose acceptance, all kinds of parts acceptance comes as you get older. When you're in your late 20s, you really do look at your body differently than you looked at it when you were 17, 18, 23. You do shift and you do come to understand what is great about you that is unique, not
Yep.
cookie cutter. Anyway, thank you, Brooke, for your insight, for your bravery, and here's to everyone embracing their vulva and loving it.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of 7 on Sundays.
The 7 on Sundays podcast represents the opinions of Dr. Shez Levy and Stephanie Boy based on our experience. It also shares the stories, behaviors, and opinions of our guests that we do not necessarily condone or view as healthy. 7 on Sundays is an open forum to discuss what is happening with our listening audience. Some names and details of our guest stories have been changed to protect their anonymity. This podcast is not a substitute for mental health treatment. If you are in crisis and in need of mental health support, please call 988, the Suicide and Crisis Lifeline. It is free and confidential.
Join the conversation and connect with us through our website, 7onsundays.com. That's the number 7onsundays.com. We encourage everyone to do their own research. Thank you and be well.